Welcome to Parent Squad. I'm Felicia Lawrence, and today we're talking about winning the battle of homework and chores. How do you get your kids to do these things without conflict? All good questions. Well, here to help us answer them, Riley Children's Health Clinical Psychologists, Dr. Melissa Hord and Dr. Gabriela Rodriguez. You see, this is a serious topic. We had to bring two doctors in to help you with this one. So thanks for being here, ladies.
Thank you.
Let's actually start with chores. How do you reduce the conflict there? Because as a parent, you know, you're obviously like, okay, can you do this? Can you do that? Your brain is moving 1,000 times and you are trying to not ask nicely, but you also don't want to ask your children. You want them to do what you're telling them to do, but at the same, so as you could see, it's a conundrum. Please, how do you
and I think
help reduce the
exactly what
conflict?
you just said ends up being the trap that a lot of parents fall into, right? They don't want to sound too demanding and harsh, so they try to soften their instruction by making it a question, and they'll say, will you please clean up your room? But the problem is, when you make it a question, that really makes it sound optional, right?
Yeah.
Because I mean,
But you're not trying to be
no.
a drill sergeant, a military drill sergeant, but so go ahead.
Yeah, but it actually is more effective to
Oh,
say,
we should be a
yes,
military.
but,
Okay.
well, but you can
I'm
be
learning
nice.
too.
You can be nice though. You can say, please clean up your room. And so you can still say it in a nice, respectful way.
Yes.
But be direct about it so that the kid knows, oh, they're serious. They want me to go do this, right? So giving effective instructions is really important. So we want to not turn it into a question, and we don't want to use the royal let's, because when we say let's, it also still sounds optional. It sounds like, oh, a group of people's doing it. Maybe I don't want to, you know?
Yeah, I see you nodding your head, Dr. Rodriguez. What do you see in your practice?
Yeah, well, I do see that a lot of parents do ask these questions, and I think it comes from a good place. I think it comes from a place of wanting to be polite, not wanting to, exactly like you said, not wanting to sound like a drill sergeant. But I do think there's this middle ground where we can be polite, we can give effective instructions. We don't have to go for one or the other. There's actually this option in the middle where we can say, it's time to clean up your room. Please clean up your room. Please get out your homework. Please get ready for school. But it doesn't have to sound like, okay, you know, we're a drill sergeant, we're going, you know, one direction after another. I think the other thing that I see is that parents are giving just a lot of directions and they're repeating the directions quite a bit. So I think another thing is to be really choosy about directions and really try to be, kind of prioritize the ones that are the most important.
Okay.
And so if it's something that you're really not willing to follow through on, if it's really not that big of a deal, then maybe that is actually a good option for a question.
Okay.
If it's like, okay, do you want peas or carrots for dinner and it's really not that big of a deal, or do you want to do story time now or later? Okay, then that's a good option for a question. But if it's hold my hand in the parking lot, that
Hold
one
my
is,
hand in the parking lot.
right, that's a big deal.
Give me
right?
that hand in
Then
the
that
parking lot.
we should phrase that
Give
one
me
as
your
a
hand.
direction, right?
Okay.
So we can help our kids follow directions by minimizing the number of directions we give and phrasing those as commands rather than as questions.
Okay, let's really break this down because you guys sound so nice and sweet and we're saying please and please clean up your room. Please, you said you could be direct and assertive and still say please and still be kind. We know that isn't always going to be received by children, okay? They have ignored what you have said once, twice, thrice, 4 times. Now you're at the point where you probably are kind of snapping or getting into it or yelling or repeating yourself. I mean, we got to talk about the realities of parenting.
Yeah.
So what is your advice then?
Yeah, so
Look, fix it.
yeah,
How do you fix
I
this?
hear you, I hear you. I would say my advice is I wouldn't actually wait until thrice, 4 times, 5 times before following through with a consequence if the direction was not listened to.
Okay.
Right? I think that is one challenge, is that we do end up kind of repeating directions quite a bit. And so really one warning is, I think, enough. And if you have not followed through, then we're going to follow up with a consequence. So it depends on the kid's age. It depends, of course, on what the household setup looks like. But usually we would recommend that if the direction was not followed through, then a consequence is going to happen. It could look like privilege removal. It could look like you're not then going to move on to the next activity, whatever that looks like, until this direction is followed through on. It depends on the situation. Are there any other things you would suggest?
Yeah, I think kind of combining what you were both talking about, I do think a lot of parents fall into that cycle of repeating, and the next thing they know, they can't stand it anymore, so they raise their voice, or they get that tone, you know, go do it now.
I know that tone. And it's also different with dads too. Everybody, I'm sure a lot of moms are sitting there and they're like, okay, but when dad says it, then you listen, or when dad says it, then you do it.
It can be different with different parents, but I think the trick is not to end up in that cycle, right? Because once you get to where you're raising your voice or you're using a tone, basically your kid has learned, I'm not going to do it until she gets to that point, right?
Yeah.
So we don't want to get to that point. And the only way to break that is not to raise
Get to
your
that
voice
point,
or
yeah.
or use the tone, right? So stopping the cycle early, like Dr. Rodriguez was saying, by having a consequence. A lot of parents want to avoid those consequences because,
Yeah.
again, that makes them feel mean, right?
Yeah.
And they don't want to be mean. But it's not mean to hold your kid accountable and to teach them to do things when they need to do them, right? That's actually parenting. That's what we're supposed to be doing. We're supposed to be helping them learn to do things when they're asked.
Okay. A routine. How can a routine play into what we're talking about here? Reducing conflict when we're talking about chores.
So routines can help because everybody will know what's expected, right? We do this at this time of day, we do this at that time of
makes
day.
sense.
And so now you're not even really having to talk about it. Or if you are talking about it, it's much briefer because you're following a pattern. And everyone does better with a pattern because then you know what the expectation is.
Okay.
Exactly. They build habits, and kids really thrive on structure and routine. They're used to it from school. I mean, from the second kids are in kindergarten or even earlier when they're in daycare, they're used to, we do circle time, then it's story time, then we have a snack, and then we do, right? Kids are used to following these patterns, and they love that predictability. And so if we can establish that for them at home as well, they may not like it at first, right? They may push back on it because sometimes it can be fun when things are unpredictable. But the fact is that eventually they'll really come to kind of yearn for that
Yeah.
predictability.
They say kids thrive in structure.
Yeah.
And setting a time for teens, a schedule for younger kids, that kind of touches on what you were just talking about.
Yeah, it does. So having that routine and schedule is really nice and predictable for the younger kids. For the teens, I always recommend just giving them a timeline. So your chores need to be done by, I don't know, 8 p.m., right? But then the parent has to follow through, right? So at 8 p.m. they need to check, make sure the chores are done, and then if they're not, there needs to be some kind of a 24-hour consequence, right? So it might be, okay, hand me your phone, you can have it back tomorrow at 8 p.m., right? So they're gonna get another chance the next day to get their phone back. We always wanna do that, right? We wanna make short, time-limited consequences for stuff like this so that they can get back on track. The other thing that's nice about that is then having just a little bit of that pain point helps their brain learn, I'm gonna remember next time to get this done before 8 p.m. because
Yeah.
I don't wanna lose my phone. And so you have to follow through so that their brain can do that. If we don't follow through, we don't give them the chance to learn how to do it.
Well, let's really dig into what you're saying here because you kind of mentioned it earlier. Parents don't want to be the mean parent, or they caved on the punishment that started and then they got the phone back early. And so you have to be comfortable with giving these consequences. I mean, let's coach the parents here.
Yeah.
What would you, can you, I guess, give more insight into that?
Yeah, I think parents have to, number one, make sure they're taking care of themselves too, right? A lot of times they're just so tired that they give in because it's
They're
just
so
too
tired.
hard to
Yeah.
stick with it, right?
Yeah.
So I think self-care is super important for parents, for caregivers. Having a break from your kids, being able to go out and do your own adult things is really important, having some balance. So number one, I would say self-care, but then also I would say, okay, what could you say in your head, right? Like, how can you tell yourself that my kid actually needs me to do this right now, right? Because we feel like we're being mean by giving a consequence, but it's not really,
In
it's
the
really
long
about
run, it pays
teaching them.
off.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. In the long run, there's less conflict, and you're helping the kid learn, which is what they need.
Yeah, and I would add that it really can help to have what the consequence is going to be in advance and setting a consequence that's appropriate for the situation. Sometimes when we're emotional because it's frustrating, right? If
situation,
we've
yeah.
asked a gazillion times for this thing to happen and it doesn't happen, in the moment we can say, you lose your phone for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
And then we're like, okay, well, actually, we can't do that because I need you to have your phone after practice so that you can call me so that I know. And we're
More
like,
of a plan is
we're in a
needed
pickle,
here.
right?
Okay.
And so if we can, think through in advance, okay, a 24-hour phone removal is actually more appropriate. That's actually something I can follow through on. If we have that in mind in advance, then it helps us to actually stick with the consequence. And so that helps us with following through, and it helps us with feeling a little bit better about it in the moment. And so if we have a plan in advance, that helps. The other thing that I would say is really helpful with, what Dr. Hord was saying about setting a time limit for the chore is that it can really help to reduce conflict, because then the parent is not providing a bunch of reminders, right? So if it's, okay, you need to do the dishes by 8 p.m., then the idea here is that the parent is not then, when dinner is done, let's say dinner's done at 6:30, parent is not gonna say, okay, remember, you need to do the dishes by 8. 6:45. Okay, remember,
Yes,
dinner.
absolutely.
Right, because then we want to provide some independence. We want to provide some autonomy. Teenager
And we
knows.
don't want to keep running our mouth and having to repeat it.
Exactly.
And
So we're reducing some conflict there because the teenager knows.
I like that.
When the deadline is for the chore to be done.
Yeah.
We're not providing lots of repetition. There's a consequence in place. If they don't meet the deadline, then the consequence will be followed through on. It will be followed through on, and that's that, right?
Yes.
And so we'll try again tomorrow and hopefully have a better outcome.
I am learning so much. So I have a 19-month-old, so I haven't quite hit this part, but I can already see I can already see just the dynamic there and how important it is to establish that. And it's so hard because you don't want to see your children upset or disappointed or mad at you, but we are there not to be their best friend. We are there to help them and support them so that they're able to navigate the real world. And in the real world, they're not going to love the real world is not going to love your child like you are. So it's like you're preparing them for life outside of your home. Okay, let's talk about homework. We know that this can be a constant battle for some parents, and you say that there are sometimes consequences are actually really, really, really important, is what we're talking about that. And so we have some more tips for that. And so what kind of support can you provide here?
Yeah, so I think it's really important to check in, see if they need any help with their homework. And I think one of the biggest things really is having that routine again, that routine and the structure of when do we do homework? Is it immediately when you get home from school? Is it, okay, you get to have a snack first and then do your homework? We know that most kids, if they're allowed to go have fun and play, it can be very hard then to want to stop doing that preferred activity and come and do a non-preferred activity like homework. So then that's going to create more conflict too. So really just creating that routine where it's part of the routine earlier when they get home is usually helpful. And then they can learn over time that this is the expectation, and it actually becomes a more natural process for everybody to sit down when they sit down and do it.
Okay.
Yeah, and I would add that the location where homework happens is really important. It depends on the kid and the family, and there's a lot of details that go into it, but we want ideally homework to happen in a location where it's easy for the parents or caregivers to be able to check in pretty frequently, especially with younger kids. Especially if it's, a kid, for example, who has ADHD and may need more frequent check-ins to make sure that they're staying on task. And so, a lot of times we recommend something like the dining area. So let's say that parents or caregivers are cooking dinner, they can kind of easily walk over to the dining area and see if kids are staying on task, doing what they're supposed to be doing.
Then you're kind of together, even if people are on different activities.
Exactly.
Still kind of together to support and be together.
Yeah, and so that oftentimes can be helpful, especially if kids are needing more support during the homework time.
Okay.
Yeah, and I think that example is a really great one for teens, right? Because you can have them in there studying on their own and you're just checking to make sure that they're not getting distracted by their phone for too long. But with a younger kid, they might need you to actually be with them more of the time. And you might actually need to help them have some breaks too, because it can be really hard for young kids to sit and do homework for very long periods of time. And so just taking a break that's time limited, again, we don't want to get stuck in playing something super fun because then it's going to be hard to come back. But maybe you take a break and listen to a song that you like, or maybe you take the dog for a short walk, or you do something where you're getting to get a break from schoolwork and then
Yes.
coming back to schoolwork.
Yes, I like that. Break it into chunks. Okay, and we talked about location. Any specific tips for teens?
I think taking the phone, the phone is such a challenge, right? Because especially the phone or the computer. And I think this is difficult because a lot of times homework is on the computer. And so it can be challenging to avoid distractions that are just on a different tab on the same browser as your homework is, right? So there's apps for that, right, that can be installed. And so I think if that's a challenge that families are experiencing, I would encourage them to look into ways that you can block out different things that you're not supposed to be using so that you can really focus on whatever the homework is that you're supposed to be on, if that's a challenge. But really there's no substitute for parents checking in, caregivers checking in frequently to support teens in doing their work. The other thing that we've talked about with teens is that a lot of teens are really seeking autonomy and are seeking, and this is a very normal, developmentally appropriate part of the teenage years, is that if things are going well, then we do actually want parents to take a step back. And so there's this kind of push and pull of course, if your teen is needing some support with homework, by all means, step in, provide support. But if things are going well, if they're getting good grades, if they're turning in their assignments, then do appropriately step back and provide them with that independence and autonomy, as long as they're showing you that they're doing what they're supposed to do.
Yeah,
Certainly.
I think the apps that they have now for schools have made it hard for parents because they can get more information about how they're doing academically than you used to be able to, right? They can see missing assignments. They can see what the scores are as they're going through. You know, you used to be just get at the end of the semester, it'd come in the
Work
mail.
or pick up or something.
Right? So I think it can be hard, especially for some parents who might be a little bit anxious about how their kid is doing. And so then they like, can't stop themselves from checking. But allowing for their kid to have some trust if they're doing well, I think is really important. So finding that balance.
And that's the thing as a parent, is it's constantly changing as your child grows and develops. You have to change too. And I'm learning that it's even at 19 months, it's like, okay, you got to step back a little bit. Okay, thank you both for being here. I know we talked about a lot. We have so much more for you at WTHR.com/Parent Squad. Stay with us, more to come.